2025 is a huge year for the USC Trojans, and especially Lincoln Riley. Do the Trojans get back on track?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into The Portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making The Portal your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk all the different things going on in college football. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com. USC Trojans. Trajectory hasn't been headed in the best place. 11-3, 8-5, and then 7-6 under Lincoln and Riley. They're spending a lot of money on NIL. They've gotten really good personnel to come in. Chad Bowden, D'Anton Lynn. Can they get it turned around? I have a lot of questions, and the man to answer those questions is none other than Marc Kulkin. I don't know, Marc. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical. Thank you once again for coming on the show, brother. Look. They have every resource known to man. They've spent a gazillion dollars. Like Chad Bowden, I heard, got $1.6 million. That's what I heard, like per. I mean, that's crazy. If they don't win now, with all the things they got going for them, and by the way, they're off to a hot start in 26 recruiting. They have number 17 class going 24/7 for the 25 group. Some key transfer portal additions. If they don't win now, Marc, what's next?
I think you have to start putting out some feelers behind the scenes of who's ready to take over this program. And again, I am not calling for the firing of Lincoln Riley. I'm nowhere close to that. But to your opening statement, what does USC have to do next? They have done everything they need to do behind the scenes. They've built up their infrastructure. They've got the football-only facility that's going to be open sometime in 2026. As you mentioned, they went out and they hired Chad Bowden away from Notre Dame, general manager. That's the new way of building up your program. Having a general manager doing it the NFL way. Head coaches, you coach. General managers, they find the guys. Yada yada yada. You've got NIL. You've got the transfer portal. You've got every possible tool in your toolbox to make USC good again. Urban Meyer says, check under the hood. What's wrong? You lift up USC's hood, and there's a beautiful engine there to work with. You've got the most fertile recruiting grounds. Hopefully USC could take advantage of that and continue to take advantage of that in 2026. But, you go 11-3 with the Heisman Trophy winner. You bring him back the following year, and you only go 8-5. There's something not right there. And then all of a sudden now, the next year, your third year into the program, where this should be, you should have a pretty good footing on the ground, have a good idea of what your program is, who you have. You've been able to use the transfer portal. You shouldn't be going from 8-5 to 7-6. And now you're going into year 4. What's left? You got to win. There's no more leash left. You can't just say, hey, we'll figure it out as we continue to go.
Well, I agree with that. And I've been scouring over looking at their transfer portal additions. We both agree D'Anton Lynn's a really good coach. He brought him in from UCLA. I think they did a good job. They took, 20, 30 spots, like total defense, something like that, from one year to the next. They got Keyshawn Silver come in, a big body D tackle from Kentucky that I like. Like most rosters would love to have him as their top D tackle. Well, they also got Jamal Jarrett from Georgia, another guy. They're both 330 to 360 range. They're humongous. And that's just like a little bit of what they had. So, I'm a big fan of Bishop Fitzgerald, the safety they got from Southern Cal, for NC State, 55 tackles and 3 picks. They have spent the money to give Lincoln, and again, Lynn's a really good coach. They got other good coaches on the defensive staff. If they don't win this year, what are we missing? Is there anything there? So let me ask you this. I just mentioned 3 guys out of the portal. Which other players, or if any of them, are you like, okay, this guy's going to help that defense propel itself, take them to that next level, and give USC a chance to be a playoff contender?
So you mentioned the guys who USC is bringing in from the transfer portal. Those are necessary parts. They needed big bodies in the middle to kind of crash that offensive line.
Agreed.
To allow their edge players who they brought in or recruited, like an Anthony Lucas or a Braylon Shelby or a Cameron Fountain. When that middle crushes down, it's a shorter distance from point A to point B to get to the quarterback. We saw what happened in the Super Bowl when you can rush 4 guys.
It's unreal.
Absolutely. And then you still have Eric Gentry at the second level playing linebacker. He's a unique specimen. He makes doing things on offense really difficult because you can't throw over him if he's playing in the zone. His length makes going around him even more difficult. He's got that lateral speed. You mentioned the safety coming over from North Carolina State, Bishop. He's pairing up with Kamari Ramsey, who's coming back. So you might have the
really
two best
good combo. Really good combo.
A great safety combo. I think USC has what they need at the second level with linebacker with Eric Gentry. They got Desmond Stevens, who they recruited last year out of Michigan. You brought in Rob Ryan to kind of take over that group where Matt Entz is now the head coach at Fresno State. And you've got a dynamic duo of Eric Henderson and Sean Nua controlling the defensive line. It's hard to believe, but in 2025, Lincoln Riley probably has a better roster on the defensive side of the ball than he does on the offensive side of the ball.
That's really unusual.
Maybe it starts working out for him now. I don't know.
Well, I think that was a big part of it. So just to be clear, we are both in 100% agreement that their NIL, their however you want to organize it, is on par with the elite. They've given Lincoln at least a chance now because it's not like they're lacking at any of the 3 levels on defense. Harvey, the kid they brought in from San Jose State's another good DB.
Yeah.
Another very good. He had 4 picks last. He's a good football player. He's going to compete for playing time. They have guys. Is it safe to say that based on their NIL and their portal additions, I'm sure a few freshmen will play too. Like if they go anything less than 9-3, it'd be kind of shocking. I mean, I think their quarterback's better than people give him credit. He just needs more reps now. I think he's going to be pretty good. Is 9-3 the bottom?
Well, depends who you're asking. But if you're asking me, 9-3 is right there at the cusp of this might be one of those. What's going on? What more do you need, Coach Riley? Because when you look at their schedule, it sets up nicely. You look at their first 4 games, no reason they shouldn't be 4-0. You open up at home against Missouri State, Georgia Southern. You go on the road to Purdue. It's brand new coaching staff. You like Barry Odom. He's a great
They're
coach.
terrible. They're terrible.
They're terrible. You're coming home, you take on Michigan State. If you're not 4-0,
something's wrong.
Something's wrong. Now, granted, you're saying, well, what happens if this person suffers an injury? Okay, fine.
Injuries are the one exception to every sport all the time.
Always the caveat to the discussion. I'm one of the guys who's exploring. I think Jaden Mayava he has the physical tools to be the guy. I'm more concerned with what's between the ears. So going back to Lincoln Riley, when he falls in love with a quarterback, he's going to stay with that quarterback. Is Husan Longstreet, is this the year where Lincoln Riley can say, you know what? I've got enough on defense right now where let me change my offense philosophy a little bit more. Let me not put everything on the quarterback's shoulders. Let me use all those running backs now that I have.
They're good.
I've got a room of tight ends that are pretty talented. I don't have all those mouths to feed on the outside at wide receiver anymore. I trim that number 1 tree down to 2 guys and say, you know what? Let's see what the true freshman can do. If he has the playbook down and he shows that he's a team leader, is it out of the question that Coach Riley runs with a true freshman out of the box this year?
By mid-season, like if they lay an egg at Notre Dame or something like that, that's the key. They're not going to start him against Notre Dame, I hope. If he's starting against Notre Dame's defense, that probably wouldn't be a wise decision. But outside of that, like if they lay an egg there, then you could see at least, because I've seen him play well. He's got an insane arm. Just needs to learn to take something off once in a while so he doesn't kill anybody. But man, he's built like a boxer. That kid is shredded, and he can run. So I think the RPO game would fit with. I don't think he's got to change it much. Just don't call as many passes. least early on. And maybe he splits time. If he beats him out, then he can sell the future because, okay, now we got things going. But one of those two guys has to take the step forward because, again, I think their defense, Lynn's a really good coordinator. They brought in the North Dakota State guy, be the linebacker. They have guys on the staff now on defense. You're like, okay, they're in the right direction. I still need to see them be more clutch on defense. That would be nice, but that's
sure.
Everybody.
And I think last year being clutch on defense, that was more of a depth problem. They just didn't have enough body. I mean, when you bring in a Bear Alexander and you play that whole NIL game and he sat out because he wasn't sitting out because he was dinged up. He was renegotiating. He got a new NIL deal.
100%.
And then all of a sudden you're going into game 4 of the regular season. I want more. You quit on your team. That's the type of stuff that, that you're dealing with last year. But USC's defense literally was giving up 24 points per game last season. And if you take away the pick sixes that USC's quarterbacks were throwing, that number was actually close to 22 points per game. A Lincoln Riley team that scores an average of 30 plus points per game, and your defense is only giving up 22, 24 points a game, you should be winning more than 6 regular season games. Bottom line, I don't care how many Bear Alexanders you have. So I think Coach Riley is still learning how to become a head coach in today's world. And he has to kind of adjust his offense. Coming from the Big 12 where you can just throw it around, people used to make fun of the Pac-12 defense. The Big 12 defense
was different,
horrible. Bottom line, just horrible. Yeah. So I think he's trying to figure out, all right, I got to find that balance that I used to have at Oklahoma, where I actually ran the ball a little bit more and I used my tight ends a little bit more. You've got that roster. Start doing it.
When we come back, we're going to discuss how USC needs to win a little more at home, some recruiting initiatives, and how they can, again, get back on track. That is next here on The Portal. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. Even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to get bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team or for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I missed on my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now, USC had a pretty good recruiting class. Just depending on which company you want to go with, OSU's 24/7 had the 17th. Okay, it's pretty good. Did they get anybody that can come in and make an instant impact, Mark? Or do you think anybody that at least – what phrase do I want to use? At least add that depth piece, because, like, if you think about recruiting for USC, when I was hot and heavy with the early 2000s, like I used to talk to Reggie Bush and these guys, like every other kid I talked to, it was just a joke because it's like, even if it was a kid from rural Georgia, USC was in on them. I mean, like an area where they couldn't probably pick out California on the map. Is there anybody they are coming in? Hopefully for them, because you already hinted at this, they need to do better locally, or else they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Like, let me give you an example. USC's recruiting class, again, this is just by 24/7 Sports.
Sure.
17th. And they got some pretty good guys. Longstreet's the guy that everybody talks about. They got Jahkeem Stewart, the kid that reclassed. He's obviously going to play. But is there anybody else? Matai Tagoa, is that his name? The linebacker from San Clemente, famous program. Anybody else you think is going to make an impact? Because, like you said, depth, that's a concern.
So, as far as who's going to probably who's going to get some playing time this year, at least early, you touched on Jahkeem Stewart.
That's a lock.
Yeah, I mean, you bring him in. I see him as one of those. You hate to put that much pressure on him, but he could be a program changer. Remember when Pete Carroll took over? He needed that one anchor recruit that kind of everybody would gravitate to and say, all right, well, he's willing to go to USC. I think I'm willing to take that risk as well. Sean Cody, he was that dude.
Yep.
He
was going to go to UCLA, and then
he was actually going to go to Notre Dame. His dad was a Notre Dame fan. And Ed Orgeron was able to scoop up and make that happen. But I look at Jahkeem Stewart the same way. When Sean Cody arrived at USC, he started off playing outside defensive end. He eventually moved inside. I see Jahkeem that same way. He's the same type of player, but he's also that marquee player that people say, oh, Jahkeem's coming to USC. Maybe I should give them a second look. So he's one guy. Matai Tagoai, the linebacker, safety, what athlete, I guess, whatever you want to designate him at, from San Clemente, he has a chance to come in. Again, I'm going a little old school. I like to I compare him to a Matt Grudegood.
God,
somebody
he was a good player.
Just who plays the game, knows football, loves the game. He can be another type of player like that. But when you look at the rest of their class, if I'm using, they were anywhere from top 15 to top 20, depending on which network you want to use. I don't know how many guys will play this year, but when you look at what they did, they filled specific needs. They got a couple of really good offensive tackles in Alex Payne and Aaron Dunn.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, they probably won't play this year. Hopefully they don't have to play this year.
Yeah, O-lineman in the freshman class starting and stuff, that's bad.
Yeah, and there's very few Tyron Smiths out there that you say, hey, you've earned it, go take it. In the secondary, they were able to keep a Tristan Castro home, which is another good player from the Inland Empire, Southern California. But again, you go down their list, maybe the JC running back, Waymon Jordan, he might be able to see some playing time.
They're loaded at running back, though.
Exactly. There's 6 of them now.
Yeah, they have an injury there. They're still good.
Yeah, and 2 of them are transfers. Eli Sanders, the senior running back from New Mexico, 1,000-yard rusher last year. I guess you kind of anticipate him coming in and just taking over the role for Woody Marks.
Right.
I look at why are you recruiting guys if you're not going to develop them and play them? You got Brian Jackson back there. You saw him play a little bit in the bowl game against Texas A&M. Again, I go down the list and maybe Floyd Boucard because of his body size.
He's an athlete. I've seen him up close.
So have I. I thought he was one of the player's older brothers when he was on a recruiting. I was like, wow.
Yeah, he's an impressive kid. He's out of Miami. Yeah, he's a good player.
So I don't know how many from 2025 will play. Maybe a Stephen Miller, maybe a D. Reddick. I'm looking at bodies who are physically developed. But again, I think you're going to go with who you rolled with mostly last year because a lot of those guys are returning. Cornerback is going to be interesting. You mentioned DJ Harvey.
Yeah, he needs to get some PT.
You got Marcellus Williams, local product from Bosco in the 2024 class. He's one of the guys who could be ready. You got Braylon Connolly, who came in last year. He's another guy who could be ready. I think Lincoln Riley just needs to figure out who's going to be his quarterback, get that offensive line settled. And as I mentioned, on the I think you've got more playmakers on the defensive side of the ball in 2025 that can kind of keep things going until the offense figures themselves out. That's where we're at this year.
Well, with that point, you just answered a question I have. Will the defense make a big improvement? I think they will. I think they'll be, another year in Lynn's system, understanding angles and like they just missed on too many clutch plays, whether it was a 3rd and 1, a rollout pass, they had it covered and they let the quarterback get outside, in scrambles for 5. Just annoying plays. Cut them at the ankles all year long in big games. Penn State game, they gave it away, etc. Just
cover the tight end just one time, right?
That guy's an amazing player, but for the love of mankind, come on. He had 17 catches or something like that. It was just something utterly, come on. So,
it happens every year with USC and the opposing tight end. The year before, it was Utah's tight end, Dalton Kincaid. It's Stanford has been abusing USC with their tight ends
for years. Well, let me ask you this. Stanford aside, Notre Dame or Utah, whoever at tight, there's always something. But is there another way? Like, do you think after the spring window, like, do they need to add one more player or something on defense? I think they'll be pretty good. Is there, if you could take one more position, take one more guy, throw a little more NIL money at somebody? What do you think?
It's at the linebacker spot, because once you get past Eric Gentry, everything is potential.
Okay.
And you can't live on potential. So I think you need to go find that true Mike linebacker, that Big Ten body thumper. Other than that, I think they've got the necessary parts that they can work with. But I have a feeling they're going to be looking pretty hard at that linebacker spot in the transfer portal.
When we come back, I want to get Marc's take on overall, like the move to the Big Ten and everything. It's a holistically different deal. That is next here on The Portal. Marc, going to the Big Ten is different just from the distance factor. I mean, they go to Indiana twice this next year, which is kind of weird because they play Purdue and yeah. I mean, it's just it's bizarre. So, do you think those things, like on one side, I know it helps recruiting because your coaches are going to go out on Friday night and see kids in those areas. Pennsylvania, like if they play at Penn State, you're going to go to Philadelphia or somewhere in Scoutsville. That's the good news. Do you think that has hurt the program with California recruiting? And like, how does that adapt? Because like, if you're an LA parent, you're like, oh man, we obviously can see the home games, but they're not playing anybody else except for UCLA close to home anymore. Do you think that it's a good give and take? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm still trying to, obviously last year was the first year, so we have a small sample size to use. As far as recruiting, I don't think it's playing a part in why USC hasn't done as well as they should be doing with their own local recruiting. I think that's changing this year with the 2026 class, 2027 as well. I think it's a matter of styles. USC they had a fourth quarter lead in every single game they played last year, save for that Notre Dame game. And that was including on the road. They lost. How did they lose at Minnesota? Do you remember that touchdown that they actually had a great fourth down stand? They went to the replay official. The replay official says, well, we didn't see it cross the line, but we felt it did. So you lose a game that way. You go to Maryland, you've got a 14-point lead, but you don't fall in love with the run game. You allow that happen on the road. Same thing at Michigan. You've had that game won. You alluded to, you take a bad angle, boom, all of a sudden you've got a guy running 60 yards for a touchdown. USC was in a position to win a lot of games last year. And again, they did enough on defense to keep them in games, but the offense wasn't generating it. So as far as recruiting, I don't think distance really matters anymore, because with NIL, with certain packages, I'm sure you can get your parents flown in and out to go away to games. I know they fly parents in to come to the home games. So again, I really don't think that's an issue. It's a matter of, have we identified what we need to do with NIL? How much do we need to stay with the transfer portal? How much do we just need to stay with the high school recruits? I think that's been the biggest problem, is they're recruiting guys, but they're not playing those guys. They're playing the guys they're getting from the transfer portal. And I think you see a little bit of that going on up at Oregon as well. They got all these great recruiting classes, but they're playing the guys that they're paying $1 million to bring in as a mercenary for a year or two. I mean, I brought up the whole Bear Alexander thing. Same thing happened with Emmanuel Prignon. USC brought him in for 2 years. They developed him. They gave him a great NIL package right before the bowl game. He plays in the bowl game. 2 weeks later, I'm in the transfer portal. Where is he going? Up north. I don't think it's a matter of USC making the effort. I think it's a matter of what do their parents want today? And it just seems like it's coming down to dollars and cents. And that's why USC is making such a concerted effort with NIL this year. They just figured, hey, you can't beat them, you got to play the same game. I don't think they were up. I don't think when NIL came aboard, USC looked at it as, we're going to reward players for what they've done in college. Well, it's turned into pay for play. You've got to pay players coming out of high school just to come play for you. USC spent $1.5 million or whatever allegedly for Chad Bowden. They're paying how much for Jahkeem Stewart per year?
Oh, I'm sure it's a lot.
The guy's played 11, 12 games in high school. That's the risk you have to take now.
Yeah, I agree. Marc, I'll get you out of here on this one.
Excuse me.
We both expect USC to improve this year and all that. And it's a really good year in the state of California for high school recruiting. Let's say they're in the conversation for the playoff going into the final two games, whether they make it or not. Do you think that would help them with local recruiting? Because you and I have talked about it. The SEC, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, they've all come in, Oregon, obviously, have come in. Do you think they could at least close the gap with a really good season and give Lincoln a little bit more of a, okay, pat on the back from the administration? Some of the local writers be told to write positive things. That's how this works. I've been on both sides of that.
Sure.
Do you think that's the case? Like, let's say they go 10-2. Do you think that would help them?
Oh, they get it. Well, first of all, they go 10-2. They're in the playoffs.
That's exactly right.
And yes, that's just part of the Southern California culture. They like winners. Look what's going on with USC basketball right now. The women's side is winning. The crowds are showing up. They're filling Galen Center. The men play as hard as the women, but you struggle to get 5,000 fans in there. USC football, when they're winning, everybody wants to be a part of that program, whether it's a recruit, whatever part of the country you're from. Yeah, they're going to stay home. If USC is winning, that's their strongest asset. Pete Carroll was a great head coach. He was a great communicator. I wonder how he would be able to work in today's college football environment. I don't know if he would be as successful just because of the transfer portal, because of NIL. He didn't have that to work with when he was coaching in college. USC has all that in their back pocket now. They could pick players out of their own backyard, and now you could pay them, and now you're also getting a portion of the revenue sharing. There's no reason to leave Southern California anymore. But again, yeah, you have to win. Players, if you're a competitive person, you want to win. And there's just not enough people out there saying, well, I'm going to go be the guy to go help turn that program around. I don't know how much of that still exists in today's high school athletics, because even in the high school level, they're just going to the winning programs. I mean, I grew up in Long Beach. I played for 1 year high school football. But Long Beach Poly, everybody knows that name.
Jackrabbits.
They owned the league they played in Southern California. They're an afterthought. Millikan High School is the team that owns the Moore League now in Long Beach. For people who don't follow recruiting, that is literally 180 degrees. Long Beach Poly at one time, and they probably still do, used to put the most players in the NFL.
Yeah, they had it for a long time.
Through Long Beach Poly. Long Beach Poly struggles to put together football teams now.
It's wild.
That's a problem in Southern California.
Marc, I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
So when I'm not helping out Brian here on the Locked On Portal show, I do Locked On USC 5 times a week. And when I'm not doing Locked On USC, head on over there to wearesc.com over there, part of the On3 network. And get all the written content from myself and Eric McKinney and Scott Schrader and Chris Arledge. Got you covered with USC.
I appreciate that, sir. You can find the portal, all the same places that Marc can be found. You can Spotify, Apple, obviously here on YouTube. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe, and share the Portal Podcast. We will see you again soon.